Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us. An Oxfam report shows that billionaire wealth jumped by over 16% in 2025 alone, or by 2.5 trillion US dollars. That's 3 times faster than the past 5-year average, to a whopping $18.3 trillion. Releasing its annual report on inequality ahead of the World Economic Forum's kickoff in Davos, Switzerland, Oxfam is warning that the inequality gap continues to widen substantially. It noted that the 2.5 trillion increase in billionaire wealth would be sufficient to eradicate extreme global poverty 26 times over. Now, the report also highlighted that the number of dollar billionaires topped 3,000 last year, the first time ever, with the richest individual in the world, South African-born Elon Musk, surpassing $500 billion in terms of wealth alone. The social activism organization is also warning against the alarming growth in wealthy individuals assuming political power and owning critical media information outlets, saying there's a trend to uphold the interests of the wealthy while abandoning the needs of ordinary citizens concerned with basic issues like the cost of living and having access to decent, affordable services.
All right, to unpack this report with us is SABC News Economics reporter Nompumelelo Siziba. Good afternoon, Nompumelelo. A very interesting report revealing that not only are the wealthy getting wealthier, but they're also gaining greater control on the political front. But of course, we appreciate that those with financial means have always funded democracy, if you will. But this, which is detailed in the report, speaks of a different kind of participation in the democratic process. Just talk us through this report.
Thanks very much, Mfundo. Yes, well, you know, what the report is very concerned about is the increasing tendency for the wealthy to assume power. I think a great example right now is the United States, where we have Donald Trump, who is a very wealthy man, you know, holding the reins of power and having steered key legislation, or having, you know, really pushed for key legislation to be pushed that seeks to cut taxes specifically for billionaires, cutting benefits, really important benefits for regular Americans in terms of health care, for example, and really just creating a situation where the have-nots really feel like they're having far less, while billionaires and multimillionaires are just getting wealthier and wealthier. We saw that on global stock markets, where a lot of the wealth is derived from. There was a massive increase in wealth because there was that massive increase in valuations on stock exchanges around the world. And that has set to divide those who have and those who don't, with ordinary folks struggling to make ends meet and afford the cost of living, which is always higher. While we hear that inflation is coming down, that's not the lived experience of ordinary people.
Mm-hmm. So essentially what we're seeing here is that big business now has an ally in the form of a political head who would now ensure that when it comes to policy formulation, perhaps the interests or issues of big business are also at the forefront. But also this meeting comes at a time, or at least the theme of the meeting is a spirit of dialogue, but it comes at a time when Oxfam has raised serious concerns that the super rich are increasingly also controlling the means of communication. Can you just unpack this data for us, just what the report exactly says insofar as practical examples are concerned, because we know that among the billionaires, Jeff Bezos has gone on to acquire the Washington Post.
Yes, absolutely. You're right about that. I mean, it's quite historical that very wealthy individuals have owned, you know, communications facilities. In the UK, for example, about 3/4 of the media there are actually run by 4 super rich families. And so that is a concern, because to some extent it means that they're able to control the narrative, because in newsrooms and so on, you know, you have an SOP, you have rules around what you can and what you can't write. I mean, we've heard recently about guidelines that have been given at places like the BBC and CNN around what can be said and can't be said about the conflict that's taking place in Gaza. You know, with issues around whether it is a conflict, can people who are not, you know, on the same level be deemed to be at war? Or is it one person inflicting pain on another person? You know, that kind of thing. So that's very interesting. Of course, we know that there was that whole issue a couple of years ago, or a few years ago, I can't quite remember, when Elon Musk wanted to take over Twitter, which he now calls X. and he has control over that, and he is the richest man in the world, and he has very, very strong views on certain issues. And according to Oxfam, they say that hate speech following him taking ownership of X has gone through the roof. So that's a real concern, because you would expect anyone who owns that kind of communication system to ensure that there are rules that people abide by. But apparently hate speech has gone through the roof. And this is filtered through, the world, where we see that people are not so understanding. Racism has increased. Yeah. Anti-Semitism has increased, and Islamophobia has increased, and all of those kinds of things, which is really negative. There doesn't seem to be any checks and balances to deal with these sorts of issues.
Honestly, quite worrying, because media, being such a powerful platform, was meant to essentially be a conduit to connect leaders to ordinary citizens. But surely how messages are being framed now leads to some sort of a control of the narrative. But Oxfam has also raised another important point, or they've estimated that billionaires are now 4,000 times more likely to hold political office than ordinary citizens. Just take us through this aspect of their data.
Yeah, well, that is a very important issue, because if you have a situation where you've got a balance of representation, the rich, the middle class, people who come from less well-off backgrounds, you have those type of people representing you as a whole in places like Parliament around the world and so on, then you're going to get a good mix of people. But if you see a whole load of very rich people landing up in places like Parliament, it means that their ability to relate to the man on the ground becomes that much more difficult, because their lived experience is very different to the man on the street. And therefore, what they will be advocating for will be very different if the picture was more mixed. And there were conversations that were being had for people to have a meeting of minds about how to get the balance right between getting all the priorities straight. So we have a situation where we know that the cost of living has been a problem for many people around the world. We've seen protests around the world. And this situation doesn't seem to be going away. And in the meantime, we have somebody like Donald Trump, who's pushing for things like AI investment and cryptocurrency, really taking care of the rich man's club, but not taking care really of ordinary people. Let's look at what's happening in the United States now in areas like Minnesota, where they're employing ICE to ruffle up people who are US citizens. Yeah. And of course, there are different views around why this is happening. Some say people, because they have brown skin, they're being victimized, and those who really are illegal are not being pursued. Brown-skinned people who are US citizens are, facing the wrath of this very unfair system. So it's very negative indeed. And basically, if you have oligarchs, which is the fear that we all have now, running the world, it means they're really going to just look after their interests, the interests of the wealthy, accumulating more, and to hell with the rest. I mean, 25% of the globe is what they call they find it very difficult to access food on a regular basis. And yet we have somebody like Elon Musk, who has over $500 billion to his name, and soon will be a trillionaire.
No, honestly, the inequality gap seems to be widening, but I must say a well-timed report that now it's coming out just as the World Economic Forum annual meeting sits. So a number of our reporters there will be able to just ask those questions on the sidelines to some of the super rich around not only the inequality gap now widening, but also their desire to have a greater grip on the politics front. Nompu, we'll leave it there though for now. That's SABC News Economics reporter Nompumelelo Siziba just unpacking that Oxfam report for us.